Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for waiting and hanging around inside of the waiting room. We're so excited to have you. I want to say this morning for the West Coast folks at 9 a.m., I'm logging in from Central Time Zone in Texas, although I'll be on the West Coast this evening. And so we're doing a little bit of that type of traveling for our work experience. I want to know, as we're waiting for folks to come in, where are you logging in from? Tell me in the chat, where are you logging in from? We know that we have chapters of Nordson here in San Diego, but we also know that you all have chapters all over the world. So where are you? Are you in Rhode Island? Are you in Ohio? Let us know in the chat as we get warmed up here and prepared for our culture camp experience today. All right, Cecilia, thank you. Westlake, Ohio, representing. Sunny San Diego. Hello from Cleveland. Hello, Cleveland. Look at Ohio representing out there. Amherst, another Ohioan. I don't know where Elria, Ohio is in terms of context, but you're in the Ohio family out there. Love to see you. Look at Ohio is representing. And I know that some of my team members on the Open Doors team today are representing Miracosta College in Oceanside, California. We know that Sarah is in Carlsbad. She's driving, and so we don't want her to try and stop and chat. I'm representing for you, Sarah. Thank you all so much for joining me wherever you are, for logging in with a click of the button so that we can connect and create culture here together as a part of our culture camp experience today. Now, you might be wondering, like, how did we get invited to visit you all virtually at Nordson? And I want to just explain a little bit of the relationship that we have developed with your WIN and NBIN members. I'm Dr. Rachel Hastings. I'm one of the co-founders of the Open Doors experience at Miracosta. I'm along with my partner, Nate Scharf. You can see his video there. Nate, thanks for the wave. We got together after our 2020 pandemic experience and really started to put, some elbow grease into developing programs that would create experiences where culturally grounded workplace experiences where we can grow within our professional lives and on a personal level as well. And what we developed was a program called Open Doors. We got a $65,000 grant to be able to train students and partner with businesses in the North San Diego area. Luckily for us, this actually had a global impact. So again, we're able to communicate and reach you all across borders, which is a part of the cultural dynamic here. We wanted to partner with businesses and to create pathways for our students to be able to work at businesses like Nordson, but more importantly, to support the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs and projects that you all are developing here at Nordson. And so we're here as a support for you all, and we got a little support along the way to put this program into action. So WIN and NBIN are your sponsors today. I'd like to take a moment and let Beth Beers from WIN introduce who they are today. Hi, Beth.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Doc. Thrilled to have you here with us today, Doc, as well as some of the interns that we've been working with. My name is Beth Beers. I'm representing Northeast Ohio WIN chapter today. And Sarah, I know Sarah Vaz is on the line and some other lots of people from WIN. So we're very happy to have you here and very happy to help sponsor along with NBIN.
And speaking of NBIN, Kayla Anderson, I welcome you to tell us a little bit about NBIN.
Sure. So my name is Kayla Anderson. I'm a co-chair of NBIN, which is Nordson's Black Employee Network. And Cecilia Rinder is also on the line. She is the other co-chair, and we're really excited to co-sponsor this with WIN and learn about some culture and diversity and inclusion today.
Love it. Love it. As I said before, I'm Dr. Rachel Hastings. Everyone calls me Doc. My students dubbed me Doc a long time ago. I recognize as a Black woman in academia. I represent a very small percentage of women who have PhDs. And so Doc is my way of being interpersonal and professional. And so for the last decade, I've been pretty privileged that my students call me Doc. Folks in the community have rippled over and call me Doc. You are welcome to call me Doc, or Rachel is fine as well. as I hope that we begin a pretty cool relationship with one another today. I have the privilege of working at MiraCosta College in Oceanside, California. I'm a tenured professor of communication. And so I like to say that MiraCosta and I are married. I love their retirement program. And so I love my job. We're gonna stay with them as long as possible. I get to do great things like help people like Nate and Nina Lovejoy and the Career Center co-found programs like Open Doors. And I also founded a digital communication program called Digit. Now, Digit is important to us because this spring, we actually trained a cohort of influencers that have been able to work with Nordson, WIN, and InBin over the last 16 weeks. And so let me tell you a little bit about what we did when we partnered with WIN and InBin. First, we trained our Digit interns to be able to create digital marketing materials, content creation skills, email funnels, email banners, how to do social media templates, do newsletter templates, to prepare them for doing this type of work at a real job in a real location, right? We did this all virtually. Then we worked with WIN and InBin, and we did a behind the scenes interview hacks training. And we put on interviews where every single one of our interns had the opportunity to intern for a content creator position with Nordson that we paid for through our grant. Now, right now, we have 3 different interns who are working directly with Nordson. I'm going to give a shout out to them. I saw Lauren Miller out there. I saw Sky Lieberton out there. I know Taylor Holly is out there. Sony Avalos was our 4th intern who is also working behind the scenes with us on our Nordson partnership. They're having direct contact with Beth Beers, Sarah Voss, Cecilia, and Kayla, where they're getting opportunities to work on projects and bring them directly to you all. So we want to thank you for providing a work pathway and a career development pathway for our students as they look forward to transferring to amazing schools at the end of this year. When I say
Hey,
amazing,
Doc, sorry, I hate to interrupt, but there's a bunch of people in the waiting room waiting to get in.
Oh, let me let
Sure.
them in. We definitely want to let them in. All right, let's just go ahead and admit them all. And Nate, I'm going to make you co-host just to make sure that we don't leave anybody else out. And if you see folks come in, if you'd be kind enough to let them in. Welcome, my friends. Thank you for joining us today. Awesome. So over the last several weeks, we have had our interns working with Nordson, creating different content for them, promoting events like this, all to put together a little diversity, equity, and inclusion campaign that helps to sponsor and create strategic awareness about the affinity groups and the employee resource groups that you have available for you right here at Nordson. Now, why do we think that this is important now? Hey, we know that in 2020, every single one of us felt the effect of what was happening in the world, and that culture and our intercultural relationships became central to how we interacted with one another. They were on the spotlight of every news station. All the media was talking about it. And part of that was encouraged by the death of George Floyd, right? Now, why culture? Why brands? Why companies? Why corporations? This is the question that we need to ask ourselves since we're being sponsored by a big business that impacts us globally. In 2020, we knew that there were 3 intertwined issues at play. We knew that COVID-19 and the ensuing economic downturn was happening. We knew that there was a necessity to take action on diversity, equality, and inclusion. And we also understood that the election was prompting deep partisan divides. So we were being impacted on our personal level, we were being impacted on our professional level, and on our political lives. All of these parts of our identities were being impacted. I want to point us to a study that was conducted in August of 2020, by the Edelman Group. And Edelman conducted a second Special Trust Barometer report on the fight for racial justice in America. Now, in this study, they found that America's need to address systemic racism is not going away, and business is expected to take the lead in addressing it. They surveyed over 2,000 general population respondents. They sampled folks across age, gender, region, ethnicity, and they had 2 studies, one the week of August 14th, 21 and 2020, and then directly after the Kenosha shooting, August 28th and 31 through the 31st. This pointed us out to social justice issues. And they tell us that for both brands and corporations, the issue of systemic racism demands their attention and presents an historic opportunity. It's the crucible in which trust will be shaped for generations to come. So this means that we can't hide behind closed doors anymore. We have to actually address some of the social issues that are happening outside of our workplace, because we as people are being impacted by that, and we're bringing it back to us in our collaborative projects at work. More importantly, the study said that 76% of the general population believed that there was widespread recognition of systemic racism. And 1 in 2 individuals believed that brands should speak out against systemic racism and racial injustices. That's over 50% of people who believe that it was a part of brands' responsibility to be able to speak out about these issues. When people are speaking out, when brands are speaking out, people reported that 44% of people reported that a lack of concrete action really undercuts the credibility of the brand. So if the brand isn't taking action, then it really isn't meaning much. Also, 61% explained that words without action felt very exploitative, like people were taking advantage of the social justice situation to gain some type of traction on the issue, but not necessarily really put some inways and some inroads on these issues. The report really boiled down to 3 things. Brands and corporations must create change. They needed to educate and influence change, and they needed to get their house in order, right? They needed to make sure that their employees were feeling good and that they had a good representation as a brand in terms of addressing these types of issues. The number 1 reason people gave as to why brands should speak out against racism and injustice is because they owe it to their employees. So more than any of the other things, more than selling their product, more than customer relations, more than any of those other issues, they felt that brands should speak up about social justice issues because they owe it to their employees. 52% reported that brands should speak up, 55% reported that corporations have a responsibility to their employees. I think this is meaningful because we know that WIN has been around for a little while, I believe 6 years, and InBin was inspired also by the 2020 situation. And so you are encouraged top down to say, hey, we need a chapter to be able to support our Black employees during this particular time. We see this as a part of the ripple effect that is coming out of the 2020 situation. So now more than ever, we really need to recognize the value of honoring our cultural selves as members of a collaborative and global work community. And that's where Culture Camp comes in. The goal of Culture Camp is to break away from the traditional perspectives of the workplace as a space of conformity, where everyone has to look and act and behave the same way in order to uphold the values of the company. I know you all are familiar with like Mad Men, that series, where you have to kind of fit into the mold in order to be accepted as a part of the company. We want to shift that. We want to shift that to recognize that there is equifinality in our relationships, meaning that there are many different ways to solve a problem. There are many different ways to reach the same conclusion, and to realize that there is an interdependent relationship between a brand and its employees. Right? At the crux of this goal is to understand what culture is, right? And so when we talk about culture, we talk about culture as an umbrella way of life. Right? When you all think about culture, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here, and we can use the chat here to chime in. What are some highlights? Things that you immediately think of, symbols that represent your culture. You know, when we say culture, oh yeah, I know culture. These are things that I think about. Give me 1 or 2 things in the chat here so we can see if we all have a vision of what culture is. No right or wrongs here. Yes, music, food, Community, yes, community versus individuality is a huge one. Traditions, absolutely. The way that we dress, the things that we put on every day, how we dance, absolutely. I remember taking dance classes in college, and I was taking African dance classes. And one of the most beautiful things that I remember is if you were erect and standing up with an upward posture, then you were dancing in Senegal. But if you were to hunch down and bring that posture down, then you were in Nigeria. So dance is very reflective of location, of environment, of place, of space, of being, right? Way of life, beliefs, symbols. The example is the Star of David. Absolutely, Lauren. Ways that we celebrate 100%, the holidays that we celebrate, the activities that we do, the people that we do them with, and how we treat others. That's absolutely central to the culture that we belong to. When we talk about culture as an umbrella term, we're really talking about all the things, right? We're talking about your social behaviors, the institutions, the norms, the knowledge, the beliefs, the arts, the laws. We're talking about customs, capabilities, habits, attitudes, values, goals, practices. We're talking about roles, expectations, language, food, events, pastimes, how all of that is included in our way of life. And it's expressed by the individuals in the group. That's the key part here, that we create culture, right? We create culture in our everyday practice, in the behaviors that we engage in the relationships that we build with one another, right? And culture is often originated from or attributed to a specific region or location, material traits such as your racial background, your religious background, or a specific social group. Right? We know that there's a particular regional way of being and practice that this might shape the language that you use. You may speak Spanish, but do you speak, South American Spanish, or do you speak the Spanish of Mexico, right? There's very, very key kind of differences that help to delineate each group from one another. And we're not talking about necessarily small groups when we talk about culture. We're talking about large groups of individuals, like in many cases, millions of people who are practicing these things and normalizing these things for each other. We're also talking about ways that we are born into culture and ways that we are co-creating culture. When millions of people are practicing this culture, right? We are born into certain ways of being and certain practices, certain foods that we cook, we're expected to eat, certain ways that we dress, right? Culture is socially constructed. We know that it's normalized, and we know that it's policed by its culture members. If you step out of line, someone will let you know that's not appropriate for who we are and for what we do. I can think of many different incidences in my family where I had to have the talk about that's not how we behave in our family. And I'm sure that you all have examples of that as well. We are born into certain, parts of our culture. We cannot change our racial identity. We're born into our gender identities. There's fluidity within our sexual practices. However, depending on the family you're born into, their religious practice, you may have more rigidity than others. Right? And so some we are born into, and others we get together and we say, no, this is who I want to be in the world. And I'm changing it and I'm living my life in this way. And so we collaborate with others and we create the type of culture that we want to be in. We know that culture is learned, that we share it, and that it's symbol based. We use symbols to be able to help describe what we mean, the meaning of life in our everyday practices. It's integrated into our systems, into our organizations, into our institutions, and it's dynamic. It's always changing, right? The historical moment of the 50s is very different from this particular historical moment. If you lived during the pandemic, that will be a very dynamic situation that 20 years from now, we will not be experiencing in the same way. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but it won't be the same as it is today, right? It's important that we understand this because when we're born into a culture, it's pretty rigid. It's hard for us to change, almost impossible for us to change. Whereas there are some cultures that we get to co-create and it has a lot more dynamic, elements to it where we get to say, here's how we want things to work. Here's how we want things to operate. I want to point out that there are 3 different ways for us to actually think about culture. We can think about culture as a site of shared meaning. meaning that's culture that's passed down from generation through symbols. This might be, your real family culture that's cultivated within your group and with your home and your community. You also have culture as a site of contested meaning, where the culture is not necessarily shared by everyone, but it's contested and negotiated, and you butt heads along the way. American culture is a lot like this, right? Yes, we do have American values. Yes, we have American ideals, but we also have a great deal of diversity that is a part of the fabric of who our American identity is and how we perform that American identity. And we see that it's contested, and we negotiate that across different historical moments. And now more than ever in this, trans global community that we live in, where we can connect with one another with a touch of the button, globalization is important. Culture is seen as a resource for economic growth, for global trade, for political movements, for education.
Yeah, they're talking about culture.
Right? Collective resistance and social change. These points of view and definitions of culture really help to ground us into understanding how we put that into practice and how we operationalize that, right? Now, when we think about bringing that down from the large scale into what does this have to do with Nordson, and what does this have to do with me at the company that I'm working at? Company culture reflects large scale culture in that it reflects the attitudes and the behaviors of a company and its employees. Your company culture is evident in the way that you interact with the people that you work with, the values that you uphold, the decisions that you make. Your company culture encompasses a variety of different elements, including your work environment, including your company mission, including your leadership style, your values, your ethics, expectations, and goals. All of these elements are a part of your company culture. And here's one thing that's really important about the company culture. Company culture is operationalized by members of the company. That means you, right? That means you represent who the company is. That means you get to actually change things when there's tension at the company, and when culture isn't necessarily sitting so easily with one another. Right? I want to give us that type of empowerment. I want us to really lean into understanding that we are the co-creators of our company culture, that we are the ones who get to say, hey, yes, we were brought on to this company that's been here for a long time, but we're here every day and we work 40 hours a week and we put in our elbow grease to make really beautiful things happen. We want to be happy at the place that we work with. We want to feel whole when we come to work every single day, whether that's logging in from the computer or if that's driving 20 miles to get to the actual brick and mortar workplace. We want to make sure that we're 100% comfortable with being us, right? And that's an powerful thing to embrace. And some of the questions that we're going to ask ourselves today are, what happens when our personal cultural identities don't always mesh with the company culture, right? What happens when the we that we are doesn't necessarily fit in, with the company culture, right? I'm looking in the chat here. Thank you, Sherry, for the question here. When it's expected that a corporation or brand stands up for causes, is there a fine line that must be maintained to keep those opinions of the organization more neutral or not creating sides? And also, what types of suggestions are there for those of us individually to keep those opinions neutralized as a brand? I think that's an incredible question that the brand is going to have to ask itself. Does the brand want to maintain a neutralized standpoint? Do they want to be, in a metaphorical sense, Switzerland, where they don't necessarily take a stand on one issue or another? I think that the data shows that the people want brands to actually take a stand and say, here's what we stand for and why, right? And a part of doing that is doing the self-assessment to say, here's what I stand for as an individual, and then looking at the mission and the values of the company and the brands that we work for to say, do these values, do they match? Are they aligned? Can I uphold these? Can I embrace these? Can I make them better? Right? And then to decide how you want to go about putting that into action. And these are not things that happen overnight. Nothing worthwhile happens overnight, but these are a part of the internal structure of the organization where these types of conversations need to be happening to say, how do we feel about this incident that just happened? Should we put out a statement about this issue that just happened? And what kind of statement and what kind of point of view do we want to have? And a lot of that will be reflective of the mission, of the brand, of the values of the brand. And some of that comes from the top down, but a lot of that comes from the hundreds of thousands of workers who actually put in the daily, right? You're very welcome, absolutely, right? And for individuals, I do think we're gonna talk about this act of self-disclosure, like how much do we really wanna express our opinions, because we all know that expressing our opinions at the workplace can be a very dangerous thing. It has real consequences. So our quest for a culture camp is to explore the following questions. What is the relationship between our personal cultural identities and our company culture, right? What is that relationship? Are we happy with that relationship? Individually, this is self-reflective. And I have been at places where I absolutely love my job. Maricosta is one of them. Y'all already heard me say that I'm married to Maricosta. I have also been at places where I just went like, oh my dear Lord, I don't know how much more I can take of this, because my personal values were coming at odds, with the company culture that was there. Another more philosophical question that we'll ask ourselves is, how do our performances of self shift and adapt to accommodate multiple contexts, cultural differences, equity gaps, and challenges that may occur when these cultural identities come together? And by performances of self, I'm meaning our behaviors, our practices, who we are in that particular context. How do we shift and change so that the person that we represent is appropriate for that particular situation? I can tell you right now, the doc at home is not the doc at work. The doc at home is chilling in sweats and pajamas half the time. The doc at work comes to play, right? That's a shift in the performance of self. My needs shift and my role changes in this when we go between these different contexts. And if we start having these conversations, which we will over the next week, you'll start to see how your performance of self shifts and start to reflect a little bit on that. So to think about how these performances of self shift, I want to really talk about what is the self, the philosophical self, the me, the I. When we talk about the self, when we talk about that, what are we actually talking about? What goes into that? The self is an evolving composite of three different elements that are always developing over time throughout your life. They're never going to go away. They're always at work. There's always a little something that you got to put on it to make it kind of feel good and solid to you, right? There's this part of self-awareness, right? The ability to see yourself as a unique person, also to reflect upon your thoughts, your feelings, and your behaviors, right? To think about yourself in a situation and to also reflect upon how you felt, the things that you were thinking and your behaviors, and to recognize that those things are different from those around you. How much self-awareness do we have, right? There's also this idea of social comparison, right? After we do that internal self-awareness, we're also looking around at ourselves and saying, what can I observe? How do I assign meaning to other people's behaviors? And then, do I do that? Should I do that? Can I do that? And then you go about trying to shift and change your behaviors and practices as it benefits you, right? Social comparison is powerful. You may have other individuals who are at the same place in your career, professional level, right? And you might be looking around to say, hey, somebody over there just got promoted. How did they do that? I want to get promoted. You might look around and say, that person over there does half my work and makes more pay than me. What is that about? That's social comparison. And you also have the self-concept, your overall perception of who you are, as it's influenced by the beliefs, the attitudes, and the values that you have about yourself. Now, notice that this is not necessarily about how others think about you, but about how you think about you, your self-concept, right? Yes, other people definitely influence that, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Thanks, Bernice. We'll see you in a minute. The tricky part of the self is that there's always what other people are thinking, or this idea of perception. And perception is really a process of selecting information, of organizing that information so that we can interpret it in a way that we understand, in a way that it makes sense. We just take that information, we make it make sense for us. That's what perception is. And perception is tricky because we have our own perception of self that influences our self-concept, but we also have other people's perceptions that we have to navigate of us, and live up to, and not live up to, or defend, or tell people that their ideas really don't have any place, in our identity. Perception is tricky like that. It's something that is again co-created, right? We all play a part in that. Perception influences our self-esteem. It influences whether or not we think have a positive understanding of the work that we produce, or if we have imposter syndrome, where we're constantly talking ourselves out of our own value, our own contribution. Self-esteem is important to us. And it also influences self-disclosure, that information that you feel comfortable sharing. That information you're like, I'm not sharing that information with you. I don't know what you're going to do with it. I don't know where it's going to go from here. This is private. This might bring harm to me. A self-disclosure is really about how much information you feel comfortable sharing, and when and who you share that information with. We have a variety of strategies that we use to protect the self. Okay? We create a public self that we call face. You may have heard this term before, saving face, right? I know in the Asian culture, I'm Filipino, saving face is definitely a part of our culture, presenting the public self that we present to others and how we communicate to others. We want to make sure that public self always have a good face, one that's positively received. I also understand that people have masks that they wear. This public self that is more privatized, that is designed specifically so you only see a certain part of yourself when you show up wherever you are, whether that's at home or whether that's at work. Right? We wear certain masks because we don't want people to have access to certain information. These strategies are pretty important, right? Today, we're talking about the self in terms of let's celebrate who we are. Let's love thyself. Let's focus on understanding who we are. And next week, when we come back on Wednesday for part 2 of Culture Camp 2.0, we'll talk more about how that self interacts with others in the intercultural relationships, the type of conflict management strategies that we might have to implement because of all these self kind of identities and cultural identities that we carry with us. So understanding the face that we bring, how we maintain face, and also how we mask for our protection and sometimes to our detriment, right? Understanding how masking works in those situations. So today our goal is I would like us to become much more self-aware of who we are as individuals, right? And how social comparison can influence our self-concept. Now, why am I making this our goal for this particular workshop? I'm making this our goal because if we can increase our self-awareness, we'll be better prepared for when we engage in intercultural contexts and relationships at work and in life. You can only control what you can control. I can only really control me, even though I got 3 kids out here who think, I think I got control of them. They have their own minds. So we can only control us. The more comfortable we are in ourselves, the more confidence we have within ourselves, the more empowered we are within our identities, the easier it's going to be to interact and to be vulnerable in our intercultural relationships, be it in the workplace or be it in life. Okay? So we have a couple of challenges that we have designed for you all. 3 quick and easy challenges to help us practice self-awareness and self-disclosure. These challenges are designed to help you identify what you add to the culture of your company. They're going to seem simple. They're going to seem, this doesn't seem really worthwhile. Why should I really invest in this? But they do have value beyond just us engaging and supporting WIN and InBin as they grow their membership here at Nordson. What we're going to do here is you registered for today's workshop. And so I'm going to gift you with the digital downloadable of today's Culture Camp Challenge workbook. It's going to include our slide deck here, the presentations, the slides that I created for you all that walked you through the aspects of culture and aspects of the self. I hope you noticed our team having so much fun. 100% of the images that are in this slide deck are featuring our interns. We had an awesome content creation workshop during our internship, and we had so much fun creating all these photos and learning how to do carousel stories and to create professional images. And I really, really loved highlighting them throughout this slide deck. And so you'll be gifted with the slide deck as well as instructions on how to participate in our challenge activities. What can you expect? You can expect that we will have some selfie stories going on. I'm going to ask you to take some selfies of yourself. And I'm going to ask you just to put your name on it, right? And I'm going to show you how to use a free website called Canva, because digital communication is my jam. I love creating stuff. I'm also going to help you develop that skill as well. Well, you'll take a selfie photo and you'll learn how to layer a little bit of text on top of that. We have some video tutorials that will be embedded inside of our instructional manual for you all. So don't worry. We're going to walk you through each step of our selfie stories. We're going to click, we're going to play, we're going to have a good time. In fact, I just encourage all of you right now to take a screenshot of you in this moment, grab your cell phone, do a little selfie of you in this moment, and then you could actually use that as your selfie story for this week's challenge. Another thing that I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to make a short list of 10 things about you. And we're also going to show you how to make a little visual graphic or a meme using that to help self-disclose 10 things about you. We want to practice self-disclosure. Again, it's like 10 things about me. What can I possibly say? You can say that you're a mother. I can say that I'm a professor. I can say that I'm a poet and a playwright. I can say that I love Tupperware. It's a secret obsession, but I really do love Tupperware. I can tell you that coffee cups are my slight addiction. I have way too many cooking utensils for anything is free, up for game, right? Anything is up for game. It's all free. Free information that you feel comfortable self-disclosing. We're practicing self-disclosing with this particular activity. And then I'm going to ask you to put into practice a little bit of discipline in your storytelling. What Sonia Sanchez would say, we have to be disciplined in our resistance here. I want you to tell us a story about you, your autobiography, in 6 words or less, right? A 6-word autobiography about you. You'll choose one specific moment that you would like to share with us, and you'll tell us that story in 6 words. And you already learned how to take your own selfie, so you can use your selfie as a backdrop for your 6-word autobiography, right? The goal here with each of these challenges is for us to become more self-aware, for us to understand who we are and sharpen our self-concept, and also to practice self-disclosure at work, building relationships and building community here at InBin, understanding who you are as members of WIN, understanding who you are as members of InBin, and how you hope to create pathways for future women and future Black employees here at Nordson, right? Practicing a little bit of self-disclosure. This will also set us up, my friends, for us to have a pretty awesome conversation when we come back about the intercultural dynamics that happen at the workplace. What happens when our self-identity isn't really having a nice time at work, when we experience microaggressions, when we experience microassaults, when there's some type of harassment, or if we just have differences in opinion, but are trying to figure out how to be professional and collegial in our presentation of self in those moments. Those are the type of dialogues and case studies and narratives that we're going to really get into when we come back next Wednesday at this same time next Wednesday, right? So as a capstone, you can expect that by participating, you will gain increased self-awareness through engaged reflection. These activities are designed to take no more than 15 to 20 minutes at most. I like micro assignments in terms of activities that are quick and easy to complete, but that have high value. They will impact your self-esteem and your confidence about who you are and what you bring to the table. And when you do that, you can use that information to prepare for interview questions that focus on your personal background as you continue to advance in your own career at Nordson. You could create a little database about the things that are important to you and how they impact you on the job. And more importantly, for the purpose of Culture Camp here at Nordson, we want to just create connections with the company employees across these virtual borders that we have here. And we want to support WIN and NBIN as affinity groups, as employee resource groups for you, designed to help you in your career here, whether you're just starting out or if you've been here and you're a total veteran here at here at Nordson. So Culture Camp 2.0 returns on May 11th. We're super excited to have you all come back on May 11th to do some more engaged activities. I know I did a lot of the overview of what the self is today and how culture works today. And I'd love to open it up in the last 10 minutes or so that we have here for just conversation and dialogue about, how you all are feeling about these ideas of culture and the challenges that we have. I'd love to hear from your voices if you all have any questions. You can feel free to unmic if you like, or you can use the chat here.
Hey, Doc, I have a comment that I'd like to
Of course.
tell everybody. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that WIN is not just for women, that we also have men members. And that the guys are with us as allies, and NBIN is the same. It's not just for Black employees. It's also for allies. So I want to make sure that everybody feels included. Okay.
So important. So important. All right. I see a comment in the chat here. Thank you so much, Steve. Oh, thank you. I try to keep it, high energy, high enthusiasm. I am also very excited for our next session. You can expect that we'll be engaging with one another. I want to hear more of your voices. I hope to hear more of your stories. Later on in the month, as our interns finish up their work experience here at Nordson, we're definitely going to be sharing information with you all about this whole experience. We've been documenting and collecting the experiences of all the different activities that the Open Doors program has gone through over the last 16 weeks. And so we know that we're going to share that with WIN and NBIN, and we hope that they also upload that on their Nordson University or however they choose to distribute it. It will become available for you all. And so this workshop as well will be available for you all. Yes, let's see here. Well, I love the questions coming through. Laura, excuse me. Do we submit our micro assignments or do we share them? Great question. In the instruction workbook that you'll have instructions on how to submit those. We do want to collect them. And then we'll also do a little sharing out next week when we come back. And so we'll have some fun time, a little bit of fun with sharing out as well. And so you can expect the instruction manual to have that. Yes, Derwin, can we talk about boundaries? I think boundaries are so important. When do they need to be crossed to grow culture and how to cross them? It's so interesting that you frame it in that way, because my immediate thought was we need to learn how to set transparent boundaries about who we are individually, and then also transparent boundaries about the workplace and what the expectations are in terms of what role is expected to perform what particular task and what that looks like. And I think the people who are performing that task need to have a say in what that looks like as well. Those boundaries, on a personal level, I think a lot of self-awareness will help us to figure out, when we set those boundaries, when we're going to be vulnerable enough to let other people cross those boundaries. And I think it will give us the self-empowerment to ask other folks is, I have a difference in opinion. I think I'd like to go in this direction. We're getting ready to cross this boundary. What are the impacts of that? What are the potential outcomes? And do those potential outcomes actually have value that can increase the cultural environment, that you're participating in? Right? If it makes the environment better, and crossing those boundaries makes the environment better, and it advocates for particular groups, and it creates access for folks, then yes. And sometimes you don't have to ask for permission. You have to actually demand the permission to actually do those things, right? But it's very nuanced, right? So having those conversations are important. How much is culture top down rather than ground up? I think that's a really interesting question, Cecilia. It goes back to the culture that we're born into versus the culture that we co-create, right? When we think about, culture being top down, it's already set in place for us. We have to navigate those pathways and those different organizational practices that have already been set in place for us. I think that the change part typically comes when those practices and those kind of organizational models are not necessarily working for the people who put them into action every day. So the grassroots part, comes out, as well. WIN is a really good example of, there was a need that Sarah looked around and said, man, there's no resource group here for women. I'm curious about why that is. And then went about actually making it happen, right? There was something missing, came from the ground up, the employees got together, and now you have multiple chapters all over the world. Sometimes, like you all know, we talked earlier, the culture is moving in a particular direction, and the powers that be have to say, look, we need to move in this direction too, because this is what's happening right now, and we have to have a response to it. And I think that is really the story of InBen, of, okay, here's this particular moment, here's this particular need. The powers that be really want to create a space for this type of community within our culture. How can we do that, right? And so you have both of those dynamics at play here. Yeah, Dawn, I agree. I don't think that many people really see work as a place to share culture. In fact, traditionally, it's been kind of taboo to really talk about culture at the workplace. But I think we can agree that every workplace that we've gone to has its own culture, its own way of doing things, and we have to figure out, how to work it out. And I think also now, especially after the pandemic, the George Floyd incident, and the 2020 election, we can see that it's so important for us to start thinking about our culture as in the United States, but also how the business, our business practices reflect that culture as well, influence that culture as well. I know that you all have seen multiple companies come under fire for not handling social justice issues in a very positive way. Our interns did a project for us when they were doing their learning project, where they got to highlight brands that did a fantastic job of responding versus brands that have a lot of work to do. I feel, after getting to know Nordson over the last several weeks, that y'all are in a really good place to have this conversation, to open it up, to say these things are a part of our everyday lives. Like we can't wipe away, the surface level of our identities, those that we are born into. So why not have a conversation about that, and one that's respectable, where we can agree to disagree, that we don't share the same practices all the time, but we know each other now, so we can respect each other's boundaries, as was stated earlier, right? Absolutely. A cultural potluck lunch to get the conversation going. Do it in Carlsbad so I can pop up. We would love that. Or hey, maybe we'll fly out to Ohio, where most of you all are calling in from. That would be so awesome. Oh, yes. We'll be sending out the video on how to use Canva and the 10 things about me image. And we'll also be sending out the promotional videos that we made for each one of our challenges. So you all will have support along the way with participating. And I do hope that you participate. It might not seem like, a very big deal, but when we actually give a lovely little package at the end of our program to you all, we want your voice to be documented as a part of this conversation in this particular moment at Nordson. So if you could do all three, fabulous. If you could just do one, awesome, we'll take it, right? And you can choose the one that works best for you. All right. Yes, Sarah, plug. Let's definitely do some shout outs.
Hi everyone. May 15th is the International Day of the Family. And one of our WIN participants in Europe had an idea that it would be nice for us to all get to know each other personally by getting to know each other's families. So we're going to have a Yammer campaign where we, on that week, share photos of our families if you feel comfortable to celebrate the International Day of the Family. So look for that on Yammer the week of May 15th. So the week of May 16th, to share photos of your families and get to know each other personally that way. So just look for that and be open to it. If you're willing to do it, I'll be brave and start off. So
I love it. This will prepare you so that you feel confident about posting a picture of your family, one that catches everybody's best side, right? Fabulous. I know we're coming up on the end of the hour out here, but I want to make space for any other questions, comments, ideas, feelings, experiences, shout outs. Feel free to unmic and share with us your thoughts.
Hi, I was just going to say that I'm interested in learning a little bit more about myself, I think.
Yes, I'm so grateful that you said that, because that's the whole point of this particular project. We are growing individuals over time, and across history, and we change. We're not the same people. I'm not. I'll speak for myself. The same person that I was in my 20s. I'm not the same person I was in my 30s. I don't know if I'm the same person I was yesterday. And so tapping into the self and just kind of finding a way to get grounded. This is another way that these activities will help you do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The self-growth is so important. I don't know about you all. I've been doing work within anti-racism, social justice, sexual assault prevention. I've been doing this type of work for the last 20 years. And I always hate coming to a workshop that doesn't tell me how I can grow. Right? Doesn't help me figure out how I can do better in the world, because the only thing I can really control is myself. And a part of the challenges in these workshops is designed for you to have that self-growth. And through your own personal self-growth, if you bring that to the table, to the workplace every day, y'all will begin to see cultural growth, right? Within your own workplace practices. I'm not here as a see-all, like I know everything, here's the right answer. I don't like those facilitators either. I'm here to say, come as you are. You are valuable, you are important, you are meaningful to the work that we do, and we want you to create space to honor yourself, right? And when we come back, we'll figure out how to protect that self as we're moving into spaces of conflict, and how to do that in a graceful and professional way. Because I love being joyous. I don't want anyone to rob my joy. And so that's what this culture camp is really all about. So thank you everyone so much for your comments and for your questions. The chat was awesome. And I love that we're already having some more enthusiasm about leaning deeper into the self and embracing the challenges that are coming on with this. And so I'm going to hang out for a few minutes for anyone who wants to chat for a little while. And I look forward to seeing you all back here next Wednesday, May 11th. It would be 9 a.m. Pacific time and 12 p.m. Eastern time. And so I hope to see you all here next time. Thank you so much, you all. It's been a real privilege talking to you all today. Have a great one.